Hello and welcome to the podcast. First up, if you are a subscriber, thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it. If you are considering subscribing, please do. I'm trying to build this channel so that we get more interaction and create, hopefully, a bit of a community which is nourishing, friendly and supportive as we learn and grow together. Within that mix, I think it is important to ask the bigger questions. Why are we here? What is it all about? And to also look at those people who are in charge and those people who can have a big impact on our lives. I believe in freedom of speech, and I believe it is important to speak up. Some people, a couple of comments have said, well, what about the Tories, the party before? You didn't seem to say anything then. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is because I wasn't doing much on YouTube at all then. And YouTube really, in terms of focus, has only been the last few months. Also, I did speak in person about some of the, let's say, interesting strategies that were adopted by some people in the Tory party, but not online as such. However, there's another reason that I feel the need to speak up, and I think I'm not alone in this. When Labour were in opposition, Keir was in opposition, I couldn't really define who he was. And actually, I'm going to look at an article very shortly and share that with you in case you haven't seen it, which I think begins to explore that exact thing. Who is this person who's in charge? Anyway, that worried me when he was in opposition. But Labour made a lot of promises and they set themselves up to be the paragons of virtue. And it seems to me that they spent so much time baying and screaming from the sidelines, from the touchline, that they didn't really pay attention to what was actually going to be required. And some of those promises, well, they seem to not quite have come to fruition yet, at least. So right now, I think it is important to speak up. I think it's important to point things out. And from time to time, I'm not alone, I will also use humour. I believe that we have to be able to laugh at our leaders and challenge them as and when required, and also support them and praise them as and when required. But there's something about Keir and his government which is wrong. And recently, of course, he gave the speech and it was seen as a bit of a reset or a hopeful reset. So they realise that as well. But without feedback from people like you, people like me, and other folks who are speaking up, then they may think, hey, it's all going swimmingly. And it is absolutely not at all. And yes, I have seen the Angela Rayner interview about housing.
That's not the truth, and that's not the
That's
case.
what will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because
where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses, and then say there's plenty of housing already.
And no, I didn't understand it either. Anyway, on with the article that I wanted to share with you. I'll put a link in the description so you can look at the whole thing if you so desire. And it's quite interesting. It's quite critical of Keir in what is being reported, at least. So let's begin. It says, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm not putting up with this anymore may as well have been the message of Sir Keir Starmer's big speech this week, according to one senior source. So, okay, fair enough. Didn't know he was a nice guy in the first place, but I'm sure he is. Sir Keir wasn't just listing his political priorities, he was showing what has been no secret in Westminster for a few weeks, that he has a frustration, a genuine annoyance, according to another source, about how hard it seems to be to get things done. Now, I'm pretty sure that this wouldn't be on a BBC website or wouldn't be a BBC article if the sources weren't at least relatively accurate. Perhaps that isn't the case, but that would be my suspicion. And then the article goes on, the Prime Minister was not just sounding off at civil servants, insiders claim, but trying to confront gloomy public perceptions that governments can't really make much difference to our lives. Sir Keir is not someone who likes being told that something can't be done. Now, that, I have to say, can be a really positive trait in a leader if it is tempered by certain things like reality and doesn't delve into delusion and hubris. But guess what? It might not be quite so straightforward for the not-so-new PM to bare his teeth, show his frustration, and then find he's suddenly fully in control. In other words, all this posturing, this annoyance, this frustration, this need for change may not mean that it actually happens. New targets set by a new, visibly frustrated Prime Minister are unlikely suddenly to persuade you all. Persuade us of what? I imagine that he knows what he's doing, that it's for our good. Another Whitehall insider told me, I thought he managed to cosplay both Rishi and Boris in one go yesterday with 6 targets and the civil service stuff, teasing him for metaphorically dressing up as not just one but 2 of his predecessors. That's a good tease. That's funny, and it's really funny to see that written in a BBC article about Labour. Ouch, as it says. Whereas Sir Keir has 6 targets, Rishi Sunak had 5 pledges that drove his unsuccessful time in government. And just as Sir Keir spoke of naysayers in his speech, Boris Johnson was fond of taking on what he described as the doomsters and gloomsters. Let's move on. Sir Keir's joke. Hopefully you haven't seen it. Anyway, about being the next James Bond was just that, a joke. It's unclear as if he has ever indulged in fancy dress, certainly as an adult. But it is the case we've seen different versions of Sir Keir, accompanied by seeming contradictions. Oh, yes, we have. And now we begin to get into that area that I was talking about when I said that he, in opposition, seemed to be hard to define. It was like blancmange. It was like trying to look at him and find any details, but it was really misty. It was a really foggy day. There was the tough sheriff during the summer riots intent on rapidly locking up offenders, who is now exploring shorter prison sentences for some wrongdoers. He was the city schmoozer who was trying to woo business to Labour's cause, who has then slapped billions of tax on firms. And that changeability, that expediency, let's call it, of behaviours is something that a lot of us don't like from family members, don't like from friends, far less from a leader of the country with so much power, or at least the party has at this point in time. And it doesn't mean that he's necessarily wrong to have done these things, but for me, it's important for him to recognise that that doesn't go down well. It's unsettling. It's like, what does this guy represent? Who is he? This shape-shifting ability is extremely unsettling. There has been the Prime Minister who wants a radical rewiring of the state, who then appointed a classic Whitehall insider as the head of the civil service this week. So that doesn't make any sense either. But of course, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And he was, of course, the aspirant party leader from Labour's soft, squidgy left that had stood alongside Jeremy Corbyn, who then disavowed him and his policies. A senior official warns it looks like cakeism. I didn't know what that meant when I first read it, but apparently it means, in this instance, the Prime Minister wants to have it all ways and doesn't want to be defined or choose what he is really about. Or maybe, the official warns, he doesn't really know. I don't think he does know, but I think he knows something. We'll come on to that very shortly. But that flip-flopping behavioural style, particularly again from a leader, is disconcerting to all. Let's go on. The long-running criticism of Sir Keir is that he doesn't have his own ideology, isn't part of any particular political tribe, and so it can be hard to work out Freudian slip, he could be hard work. It can be hard to work out what he is really for. A former senior official describes him as a sole trader in politics who will do what is required in a particular moment but doesn't understand empathy or persuasion, telling me he doesn't persuade or influence. He wants the country to eat our all bran, but he also thinks it's beneath people to be motivated by human connection or emotion. I mean, that is interesting, to say the least. So it's hard to work out where he's coming from, what he stands for, with this lack of ideology, and a sole trader who will do what is required in a particular moment. But what's the agenda? If there's no framework, if there's no ideology, then to do what is required because of what? What's the belief behind it? What are the morals that are included in the doing what is required? And indeed ethics, but doesn't understand empathy or persuasion. Now, maybe this is what I and others, perhaps you as well, have been picking up on. The shape-shifting, the inability to actually understand what this guy represents, and someone who doesn't understand empathy or persuasion. Have you had a boss like that? I hope not, but if you had, then imagine what's happening to people right now around Keir Starmer. Empathy and persuasion. That's got to be part of the leader's toolkit. And this guy, according to this, of course it could be wrong, doesn't appear to not only be doing it, but understand it. So this dictatorial approach, which again in some of the comments about other videos people have alluded to, may not be a lot of us imagining it after all. Let me just finish off that. He also thinks it's beneath people to be motivated by human connection or emotion. I don't understand what that means. I can read it and feel a sense of dread if I interpret it one way. He also thinks it's beneath people to be motivated by human connection or emotion. So what are they meant to be motivated by? We probably won't know, or I won't know directly, because this is obviously a source who is anonymous. But it's fascinating that that's written there. It's beneath people to be motivated by human connection or emotion. So what should it be? Again, just expediency? Just do this thing because it's the thing that will give me this result in this moment. But again, to what end? Who benefits? As promised, we'll come on to what may be going on. And it's a little bit worrying. That means it's difficult for the civil service to know what he stands for or what he might instinctively want to do about most issues. I'll bet it is. Now, I know some civil servants, and that can be a tough job. That's not some easy office kind of, play table tennis or sit in beanbags type environment at all. It's where politics with the small p of the office meets the politics with the big P. And that can be quite a maelstrom. A lot of these people are hugely smart. They're very dedicated. They are servants. They understand that they're to serve, do others. And also they work really hard in an environment which can sometimes be quite brutal. So, I do worry about this. I wonder what exactly is going on. Without doubt, some officials perceive his comments this week as an attack on them. They've come as a shock. Weird is how one describes it. The comments, I think that is, but just weird anyway, and says it's come out of nowhere. The suggestion that the civil service is happy to preside over mediocrity has genuinely surprised and caused distress among officials who feel they've been busting a gut to get to know their ministers and understand what the new government is about and to help them achieve their goals. The anger is real, a senior official told me, and suggests a disconnect between Number 10 and departments where civil servants have been working like dogs to try to make sense of their new master's plans. That smacks to me of accuracy, of authenticity, of truth. I think that is highly likely to be what has been going on behind the scenes. Because, well, as observers of this government, you probably be aware that they have been difficult to figure out. They've chopped and changed. There doesn't seem to have been too much logic. They didn't also seem to understand the implications of certain things that they were doing. Again, unprepared, in my opinion, not thought through. So it must be, I think, extraordinarily difficult for these civil servants right now. Really, really tough. And on top of that, looks like Keir's getting angry, getting annoyed. His allies don't and never have pretended that Sir Keir is someone in politics to make friends. Okay. He himself freely admits he'll have to be unpopular to get things done. Yeah, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what is it that he's trying to get done? I'm still not clear. They say he's aligned with the public. He cares about what will get results, not what Westminster is preoccupied with. Okay, I can go with that. But that has perhaps meant that over time he's willing to take on different political personas to play different parts depending on what suits him at that moment. Again, to what end? Why is it suiting him? For the benefit of the nation or something else? Let's skip to here. But after 5 months in government, we are seeing the Prime Minister trying out a new part, the frustrated boss, pointing the finger at naysayers and blockers. Whoever the people are who are wallowing in the tepid bath he described is a deliberate decision. As Sir Keir is trying to tighten his grip on the government machine, it's the persona he is portraying in this moment. And then, I think something that could be very important, this part of the article. He's more determined to win than people think, says a source who's worked with the PM up close. Wonder who that is. Perhaps the only persona he truly wants to avoid is playing the losing part. Now that's interesting. It's speculation, but it's interesting speculation, and it's slightly frightening speculation. That expediency that I talked about before, that getting things done, that, hey, it doesn't matter who I'm being right now, I'll shapeshift into this individual with these beliefs, with this particular mindset to get that thing done for Keir so that he wins. And what does winning mean to him? What does not losing mean? And does that mean not losing at all costs? I wonder.